It's go time.
Welcome to the Third Down Gamble podcast with your hosts, Don Charbin and Heath Graham, with special guest host, Andrew Hoskins of the Turf District podcast.
And joining us tonight is Andrew Hoskins of the Turf District. The CFL football camps are now underway. We've had rookie camps for 4 days prior. The main camps have started as of Sunday. It's great to see football back. I don't care what time of the year it is up here, even if it's going to be a month earlier next year. I just love the fact that, for me, I can go to Griffith Stadium at the University of Saskatchewan and sit back and relax and watch some guys battle for jobs.
Yeah, it's CFL Christmas, isn't it? It's so exciting every time training camp runs around, just because when training camp opens, hope springs eternal for every team. It's not everybody is at 0-0, and you look at what you had from the year before, and you look at what is the prospect of this year. And it's always a very exciting time, and always good to see guys back out hitting each other too. I will say that that never gets old for me. So as soon as it starts to happen, I'm like, all right, it's that time of year again.
Things always happen really fast though as well, with only 2 preseason games. A lot of teams are bringing over 100 guys into camp, sometimes as many as 110, 112, and you start doing those cut downs in week 1. And it doesn't stop until you get that final roster. So a lot of bodies in camp right now, but there will be some quick activity and guys moving around.
There is on a lot of teams. I agree, and that's what happens. They bring guys up, right? I've actually been really impressed, and I understand, where my angle comes from on this. The Elks only brought 85 guys in, and it was like, okay, yes, you have to reduce by, Tuesday at the end of camp. They're only really having to cut maybe 10 guys, depending on what the non-counters are. So it's an interesting approach, because usually it's like throw everything there and see how it goes. But this is also we know who most of our starters are, and here's the guys that are going to compete for those those practice roster spots, or the backup spots, or the guys that are going to be able to help out on special teams. And I really noticed that in this last couple of days, just because I didn't have to be looking at my roster sheet all the time. I knew a lot of the names, and that's it's kind of a nice change as far as the training camp is concerned.
Now, listeners of this podcast who've heard Steve Daniel talk about what is the value of a veteran on a football team, and he has categorized it in 17 different ways to prove that the more vets you have on the field to start the season, the better you're going to be right out of the gate. And it's proven statistically, teams win more with them. They have fewer penalties, fewer mistakes. It goes up and down the ladder in terms of what the impact is. So the fact that the Elks have consistency, something that when I talked to Morley Scott, he said it was nice to end the previous season knowing who the coaching staff was going to be the following year. Something that hasn't always happened to me, that Chris Morris belief system, hey, we've got to get consistency here. It's starting to take hold.
Yeah, no, I agree. I also think that Ed Hervey kind of challenged his scouts to say, do you really want to look at this guy, and who's the guy that you're not going to bring if you bring that guy? And I think that's a really good way to kind of, you want to get your active, quote unquote, active roster as soon as you can, so that these guys can blend with each other. And yes, they did bring in some names throughout free agency, and those guys need to find their way. In the first couple of days here, we've seen a really, really nice catch by Austin Mack from Cody Fajardo, but we've also seen some off timing as they're trying to work that out again. We basically have the core of an O-line that is now being added in with a number of other O-linemen, not even really knowing who that 6th guy is going to be yet. And so really, really good, high competition. And that's what I love to see. And when they get to throw on the pads and I'm there, boy, oh boy, there's going to be some really exciting battles.
And getting to the numbers that I mentioned earlier, so Don talked about the rookie camp. So this is kind of for our listeners here. By the end of day May 9th, they had to trim it down to 85 players. Camp, essentially, as we record this, everybody's wrapped up day 2 of camp. And by the end of day 3, they have to get it down to 75 players, not counting the 2026 draft picks. So there's some special exemptions for this year's class of draftees. But as I said, if you're looking at a lot of players early on, you're cutting numbers. So really, they're cutting 10 players within 2 days of camp and then finalizing the rosters after that. So very competitive for some of those jobs. And as you said, Andrew, once the pads get on and those guys are fighting for those last couple of spots, things could get heated pretty quick.
I'm a little worried about how many fights there might be when I get to see that with the pads on. We've only seen one little scuffle so far, but when it's one-on-ones and they've got pads on, tempers will flare. And we did see today at one point, and sorry, Don, but Malik Carney came across, and as the running back got to him, he basically just shoved him, and it was like the guy stepped on a landmine. That's that would be Dwayne Randrusiak's line. The guy just blew up, and immediately after, which was interesting to see, all of the O-line guys, even the guys that were like waiting their turn, were all like, hey, you can't do that or whatever. And Malik kind of turned and was like, I just force a habit, right? Like that's the muscle memory. Figured like they worked it out. But when there's pads on and they're actually getting after one another, that it might be a little bit of a different story. But again, that's the heat of competition. And when you have really, really high competitive guys and really good competitions for spots, you're going to see that's going to happen.
You're right on. The intensity, the adrenaline, everything starts amping up day after day. It seems like an opening day of camp. Everyone's sort of getting the feel, meeting the new people. But once you get through it once and you go through a few team meetings, then suddenly it's like, yeah, I got to beat you if I want to have a job here. This is not going to go over well. It really is fascinating. And watching the Rough Riders camp, the opening day, it seemed like there was a lot of enthusiasm. Coaching staff seemed to be pretty pleased with what they'd seen out there. But again, there's a lot of those bodies that just simply won't be there by the time this podcast drops.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's the part that you are thinking, well, man, it almost seems kind of unfair to some of these guys. And yet, there's also going to be guys that are going to grab hold of that moment and then be on to that next round of looking. And there's every team has a few spots that you want to kind of look at and see like, okay, well, how are they going to either upgrade this spot or maintain this spot to what they had last year? I think that's where you see some of these battles. I've mentioned for Edmonton, the O-line is going to be a heated battle. The D-line is also going to be an interesting battle. There's a lot of spot receiver going to be a pretty interesting battle. But again, running back, you know who it is. Quarterback, we know who it is, which first time in I don't know how long that it's for sure this is the starter. We have, our linebackers, it's pretty much guaranteed where they're going to be. So, but I know when you guys, like Don, when you're looking at the riders, what are the spots that you're really looking at for those competitions right now?
Clearly, the two main ones for me are defensive line and linebackers, because in each case, there was some attrition that went on there. Now, Ottawa and Edmonton benefited from free agency in that respect. CJ Rivas, AJ Allen going to Ottawa, and of course, Malik Carney going to the Elks. So you've got to replace those people with something. And of course, Baldonado was a global. So that's another issue that the Rough Riders have to face. Corey Mace has sort of released the reins of the defense just a little bit. So there's a new defensive coordinator that's going to have to juggle all of this. The secondary is fine. Looks like Jackson Ford is probably going to be the starting safety. He seemed to have the most upside last year till injury got to him. The offense, you don't worry about because that offensive line is back. The receivers are back. The quarterback is there. And the running back, it looks like the offense is the same. So clearly What do you do on defense in the box with those 7? What happens there?
Absolutely. And what do you hear from Winnipeg there, Heath? What are you watching?
Backup quarterback is an interesting one, and everybody loves the backup quarterback story. By all reports, Taylor Elgersma has looked very good. And Don and I talked ad nauseum about the Taylor Elgersma situation in the offseason and whether he was making the right moves or not. He seems excited to be in camp. He showed well in rookie camp. He showed out well today in the regular camp as well, throwing some nice balls. He's a big body at quarterback. Looks like he's going to land a spot. And I couldn't imagine them not bringing him along at least as even the number 3 guy to learn under Zach Collaros. Bryce Perkins, with his UFL experience and Super Bowl experience, maybe is that third guy, but that's a battle right now to watch. Javon Santos-Knox went down in a running drill, injured, and he was coming into that defensive backfield as a veteran presence. So sad to see him go. We don't know the severity of that injury yet, but they're going to be looking at shoring some of that up and the secondary in defense as well. One rookie that's been also, other than Elgersma, fun to learn more about is Dante Daniels. Anybody that followed the draft, he's the guy the Bombers traded up to take as a tight end in the number 10 overall spot. 6'6", 272-pound tight end. Looks like he's going to be a bit of a Swiss Army knife. He's worked with the offensive line. He's worked with the receivers. He took some time as a long snapper. He's worked with the running backs. It looks like their plan for him is to fill that role as kind of that 6th offensive lineman. And I was thinking a lot about this. I'm excited about the Bombers offense because if you've got Brady Oliveira in the backfield that you know can block a guy blitzing, now you add somebody like Daniels onto that 6-man on that offensive line as well. If a team tries to blitz, you sneak one of those 2 guys out into the flat, and we know what Brady can do. You give the ball to a 272-pound receiver. There's not a lot of CFL DBs that want to stick their nose in there to bring him down. So that's one thing that I hope he sticks around, and I hope they find a way to use him at least sparingly on offense.
This is the type of thing that I love. I love hearing about these new names, these new guys, let's watch this and how can this person get used to strengthen this offense or defense. And it's one of the greatest parts of training camp. The second greatest part of training camp is giving everybody their new nickname. And we love that in our time. We have a guy on the team whose name is JJ Jones. And so we started calling him Trips because it's 3 J's and why not? And so I told him and he thought it was funny. So we're good. But, we figure out who gets some of the nicknames that have been tossed around are Leg Day. We've got Quadzilla. It's great. It's one of the funnest parts of training camp is being able to kind of set your ways with some of these new guys.
With the Rough Riders too, I mentioned about the Elks, but I forgot to mention with the Rough Riders, that coaching staff is intact. Even though there is the one change with Joshua Bell becoming the defensive coordinator, everything else is status quo. So you still got Mark Mueller calling the offense. But in Winnipeg, they do have Tommy Condell now with his offensive set coming to the Blue Bombers. Now, Zach Collaros seems to be pretty happy that it's him. They probably had some time together back in the East when Collaros was playing for the Ticats and the Argonauts. Beyond that, it's going to be a different feel because if you look at Tommy Condell teams, they don't tend to run a lot.
Correct. I was actually just going to say that. Collaros might be happy. I'm not exactly sure how happy Brady is at this particular moment. He is also good at catching out of the backfield. So I guess we'll see how that plays out. That another year on that offensive line too, right? In Winnipeg, we'll see how do they adapt for that? But I do think that, as you said, Heath, the Collaros Elgersma combination could be very, very helpful for the Bombers.
Well, and one big thing that the Bombers did for that offensive line, though, is they went out and got from the BC Lions, Jarrell Broxton. There's some reports that maybe Stanley Bryant is starting to look his age a little bit. And what do they do there? And I know Coach O'Shea can be stubborn, but I would hope that
Wait a
if
second. He can be stubborn?
yeah, breaking news.
I've never heard that before.
Breaking news. Coach O'Shea is stubborn and likes his veteran guys.
Hey, did you ask him about any injuries too? Like you might as well just
Yeah.
throw it all in there. Yeah.
Yeah, day to day.
Yeah, okay.
We'll see. We'll see at game time if he's dressed. I think if Bryant does look like he's slowed down a little bit, I think a conversation needs to be had about moving him over to either the interior or to right tackle. And then you've got Broxton protecting the blind side. So that's a good pickup to add in there. And then you bring in a guy, like I said, if Dante Daniels makes the roster, he can help out on whichever side is struggling a little bit to be that extra guy.
One thing, though, that we have to keep in mind, and this is a change that came into effect this year, is that the 2026 draft class, they get protected through this camp, but at the end of camp, they have to decide what they're going to do because there is no protection to bring them back next year. This is it. It's a one and done. So you've got to make the most of this opportunity.
Well, although if they get released, then their rights just become open. I actually didn't know that part. They can't do the go back to school.
Well, they can definitely go back to school if you're released by the club at the end of this camp. I don't know about the combination of going back to school. Maybe I'm overstepping there, but if they go back to school, perhaps you retain their rights. But if they're out of eligibility and they don't make the team this year as a 2026 draft pick, you used to have that accommodation where you could come back the next year, but not now.
Interesting. I actually wasn't aware of that. So you're teaching me stuff, Don.
Thank you.
That was announced late last year, I believe, that they had kind of changed some of that, and that was part of the CFLPA essentially protecting veteran players as opposed to guys coming in to try to take their jobs. You've got to be a strong enough candidate to land that roster spot right away and not get the second year of added bonus of being protected coming into camp.
Exactly. Like the CFLPA was trying to protect their veterans. That's exactly right. Because that's their constituents. The rookies, they're not there yet. They haven't made the team.
Yeah, that's fair. You could store one on a PR though, if they were like almost there but not ready quite yet. You could. I mean, you don't want to take up a valuable PR spot. I understand that, but if there is that opportunity.
And a lot of people were very afraid that this would limit the amount of turnover. In other words, how many opportunities do you have as a rookie coming out of youth sport? How many opportunities do you have to make a roster? It's going to be diminished by that one season.
Yeah, that's fair. And I can see where there would be a little bit of concern there. On the other hand, if you were good enough to draft, then you should be good enough to earn one of those spots. And again, if you become a free agent, then that doesn't mean that you don't get the call later on, right? So I think there'll be a bit of a combination of good and bad there. I don't see it as all not great, but I do think it puts some pressure on those guys to really show out. I know I've been keeping an eye on Carter Kettle that the Elks drafted right from the University of Alberta. I know that he's really been putting in that effort to make even a PR spot at this point.
Just doing some quick digging here, it does look like players returning to school, the team does retain their rights for another year. So they do have that option if they haven't graduated through their university program yet. They can defer 1 year, return to school, and still be property of that CFL franchise. But beyond that, if they are released or cut, they're essentially a free agent. Now, a lot of them are going to have close ties with that team at camp, and I don't know if there's many teams out there that are going to snap up a rookie that's cut by another team unless they've got a specific void to fill. So chances are through attrition, through injury, that guy might get called back onto the practice roster at some point with the team that they went to camp with.
Yeah, very true.
Most likely. That is probably your best avenue back in. But again, you have to have something happen that opens the door. With the amount of turnover that goes on, which seems to be less and less now that teams are getting set with their rosters. You've maybe got 4 or 5 positions, and theoretically, unless you're Ottawa and really gutting it and turning it over, that's all you've got on any team.
Yeah, I think that's a good call. I think it's a matter of it even makes it more who's going to step up. It makes it even more important that these guys come in and be ready to jump in and make an impact. When I was speaking with Dwayne Mandrusiak, he was saying, some of these guys, it's in those 3-4 plays that you're going to make, you better look stellar, because it's hard to grab that other spot.
Well, this is the thing too. When you go to preseason games, and we're on the verge of seeing the first one on Victoria weekend, it's a chance to show out. Here's your chance you're not probably out there with the number one string players, but you are out there with guys that are all trying to make the team. But do your job, run your routes, get your assignments right on defense, make sure you're in the right spot, make your field goals, whatever you're required to do it so that it makes it tougher for that coach to ignore you.
Oh, 100%. 100%. There's lots of things that I'm seeing now that I hadn't seen in a number of years. At Elks Camp, there is one kicker and one place kicker. They're not saying these are the guys. So work on your craft, right? But that gave them the ability to bring in 17 different defensive linemen, it seems. And it's like, okay, all of you guys now, let me pick the best 6 out of there, but you all better do what you're being told to do. So it's an interesting way to balance out that competition.
And that's what Don was saying. It's one thing to be able to show out in camp, but those preseason games are vitally important. So if you're auditioning on that defensive line, whatever your assignment is, if you're assigned to get after that quarterback, you get after that quarterback. If you're trying to take away the run, you make sure you take away the run, and you don't get a lot of chances. One glaring mistake can be enough to send you packing.
Yeah.
One thing I give credit to Wes Cates, who on the Riders or the Sports Cage down in Regina, I happened to catch it the other day. He was talking about what happens with rookies at camps. And one of the things he talked about was in his time with the Riders and the Stampeders, he would see a lot of guys that did everything right in camp. Were there early, studied, knew the playbook, everything like that. But as soon as the lights came on for a game, got nervous and scared. Well, you got to see that. So you need a mix. You got to show what you can do, show all your wares in front of them every day at camp. But then when the lights go on game day, make the most of it. And he said the biggest thing that guys forget, this is still a game. Make it fun and you'll relax.
Oh, that's a great point. Yeah, absolutely. And when you see those guys being able to relax with one another and yet still perform, that's the exciting part. Now, granted, you're going to have your guy that's going to fire up the team and just plays with that edge. So even in practice, he's barking at people and blah, blah, blah. But then afterwards, he's, everybody's giving a high five and let's carry on. Right. So it's, yeah, such an interesting dynamic over these next few weeks.
And this is the big show of whether or not the rookie American defensive backs were paying attention in camp or not. You get into game situations, and that's a heck of a wide field to try to cover a guy. If you get burned on some of those coverages, it could be a quick ticket home. But if you can adapt quickly to the size of the field and become a shutdown DB, that's a pretty valuable spot.
And an interesting little sidelight to this, James Johnson, who was the hero of the 2007 Grey Cup for Saskatchewan with 3 interceptions, 1 for a touchdown. He didn't make it halfway through the next season. Why? Because he was a gambler. He always undercut routes. And where it worked on Ryan Dinwiddie, ironically, coach of the Ottawa Red Blacks now, but at that time, first ever start in a football game was the Grey Cup. It worked on him. Quarterbacks that had any moxie, they torched him.
Well, and that's the thing is when there's a new guy, he can jump off the page and do all these types of things. But once the coach has film on you, now can you do it? That's the other thing, right?
What does he do with a pump and go?
Correct. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. He wants to keep doing this. All right. Well, let's just show him how this works. Yeah.
Christian Covington, released by the British Columbia Lions just as camp gets started. An NFL vet, his dad, of course, Grover Covington, an all-time great in CFL annals with the Hamilton Tiger Cats. He's on the wrong side of 30. He still wants to play. Do you think there's a home for him, and where could it be?
Oh, my. I don't know. I think that when you see that kind of a cut come right before camp starts, to me that shows that there was something in that BC Lions group of coaches that said either this isn't really going to fit with what we want, or there is that loss of a step, or maybe we need to take that out of the leadership of the defensive line, right? Because he would have that leadership just based on his experience. I'm not slamming Covington at all, but I'm just thinking in this particular situation, when I see that, I always think that it's, well, if somebody gets injured, sure, but I don't see any team like, oh, well, we need to scoop this guy up, because there's always going to be those little bit of questions as to why this is happening right before camp.
That's kind of my take on it as well, Andrew, is if another reason for that cut could be that they are really high on somebody that they're bringing in, somebody that they've drafted this year that they know can fill that role for a less expensive price. Is a possibility. If they're really high on somebody coming into camp, you look at where you can manage that salary cap. And we know BC has some very expensive players on that roster as well, both on offense and defense. So you need to save some dollars where you can. If it's a $60,000 shave to cut Covington and bring in a rookie defensive lineman that they feel is quick and can learn the job, that's what they're going to go with. Now, as far as where he fits in, I also believe it's going to be based on where injuries happen through the other 8 teams in the CFL. I agree with you. I don't think there's a high demand to say that's the guy that we must land. But if they've got somebody else that goes down injured, they've got a little bit of cap room there. They can bring in that veteran guy that they know is going to adapt quickly and fill a spot for them.
And I think you're right, Heath and Andrew both. As much as anything, the fit, but also I really do believe that because of his NFL pedigree, when he signed with the Lions, he made a few extra dollars. And they probably looked at the situation and said, look, we can put this guy in, probably does about 80%, and we pay him half. And then we've got room to pay somebody else in this roster. And that's probably part of the equation. I remember with that interview that I had with Ben Grant of the Toronto Argonauts, their play-by-play team, he talked about that with Wynton McManus. He's in Hamilton, not because the Argos didn't want him. It's because they couldn't afford him.
Yeah, and I do think that definitely plays a role. I wonder though too if it, okay, we want to look at these other guys. We're going to release you because then we don't have to put you, on a suspended list or anything along those lines. But it doesn't mean they can't turn around and add him back in later. They know what he can do, right? In the meantime, based on the numbers that you can bring to camp that we were talking about before, where you have to be down to 75, maybe this gives them that opportunity to look at another guy and see if that's worth it, or whether they need to find another way to make Covington a part of the team again, right? It kind of gives you that double-edged chance to look. And sometimes those guys you bring in last minute are just lights out, and you're like, okay, then we got to keep that guy. I wonder if there's a little bit of that going on too.
Just reviewing the Lions draft picks from 2026. If they're high on the younger guy, I'm not quite sure who it is. The only defensive lineman they picked was in the 8th round. Ebenezer Debula is the one defensive lineman that they actually did draft this year. So I don't know if you're cutting Covington for a 7th round guy. 6'1", 278 pounds, a big body on the defensive line as well. Maybe they've got somebody else in mind that they've signed as a free agent, or like I said, not necessarily a draft pick, but one of those other young American players coming up and fighting for a spot.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly. I do believe it. And they've also got Casey Sales there now, and that's a big ad, and that's another big salary. So you've got those questions you got to sort yourself through. How do we pay all of these people? Because the Lions, as we know, have gone over the top. And when Nathan Rourke came back, okay, they spent the extra money to get him. They went over, they gave up 2 draft picks as a result of it. They were fine with that because they got the guy they wanted.
Surprisingly, in 2025, the only announced salary cap infraction was the Ottawa Redblacks, over by about $18,000. So I know there was some late movement on increasing the salary cap as well, which maybe bailed some teams out. It was a bit surprising to see only one team over a small amount, and it was essentially the worst team in the league.
Yeah, what are you spending your money on, right?
Ottawa Redblacks, that's an interesting story. And of course, we've got Drew Brown as the incumbent quarterback, but he doesn't seem to be in the coach's good books, not necessarily from anything that he has done, but maybe something that the coach felt he could have done with that franchise. Of course, we got Jake Maier, a guy that he had great success with in Calgary, this being the head coach of the Ottawa Redblacks, Ryan Dinwiddie. When Jake Maier was working with Dinwiddie as his quarterbacks coach, he had a great season. Does Drew Brown look over his shoulder and go, uh-oh?
The short answer is yes. I think that that's the one team that I can think of right now that, yes, Drew Brown was signed as the starting quarterback a couple of seasons ago as the guy, but that's probably the most active competition for number one of the 9 teams in the league. Brown, we know when he's on, can put up some massive numbers. We haven't seen a game like that out of Jake Maier. He has had some success, especially in Calgary, but Drew Brown's got a handful of 400-plus yard games under his belt already as a starter. Be a really short leash if Brown is anointed the starter.
I kind of wonder, though, if you're Dinwiddie, why not work with a guy? And if you can bring Jake Maier to great heights, why not do it with Drew Brown? Part of the problem that I felt that Drew Brown had, and it's been echoed by a lot of people, is that he didn't really align himself in the pocket properly, and every once in a while would take a drop that brought a linebacker on top of him. Teach the guy where you have to be within that pocket. Teach him how quickly you have to make your reads, and then probably he's going to be your guy.
I think it really depends on what they're doing with their O-line, because although Drew Brown has had some issues there, he's also had 2 seasons where he's missed time due to being injured, and he wasn't getting a ton of support. Like, there's a reason Ottawa struggled. They sure, they need to have a different system under Dinwiddie, and I think that they need that help, but I do also think that they have to make sure that whoever they're putting in at quarterback has some kind of protection. The advantage that Drew Brown would have, at least in my mind, is that he moves a lot better than Jake Maier. And I'm not saying that Maier's a bad quarterback. He's just never struck me as a regular starting quarterback. And I could see where that difference in attitude and the ability to lead could be different. And I just don't know what Dinwiddie is looking for to have that in there. But either way, they better have some type of system to make sure that those guys aren't getting hurt, because that's where the problem has come, I think, in the last couple of years.
Well, and they have made some moves to shore up that offensive line as well. They've got some veteran presence on there. Martez Ivey, Peter Godber, Drew DeJarle. They went out and drafted a guy first overall as an offensive lineman as well.
Well, that's Ottawa. They do that all the time.
Giordano Vaccaro.
Exactly. But this is not the first time, right? There was a couple of years ago that they took offensive lineman as a first overall pick as well that didn't really pan out.
Dante Bull, wasn't it?
Exactly.
But it was a different group of people making the pick this time, and that might help as well. The whole idea of getting Dinwiddie into Ottawa was in part to have more player personnel say. So how much did Dinwiddie have to say over this? And the one thing that I thought that the Argonauts could do was plug and play. They seemed to find people. Now, Dinwiddie had stated in his opening presser in Ottawa that more and more of that responsibility was coming onto him, and he felt he was ready. And when he knew he couldn't get it in Toronto, he could find an opening in Ottawa that would give it to him. That's why he made the move.
I think it's going to be very interesting to see how he handles that. Having to not only this is something we've talked about on our show a lot, is now you're not only the guy that says, you know what, I know you can do all this. I know you've got this in you and all this type of thing. And the next week has to have the conversation of, well, but I can only pay you this much. I mean, you're not you're not this guy in the league. Like, I don't know how you balance that properly. And, I know, Dave Dickinson is doing that. We all know, well, especially Don, you and I in particular know what happens when you have a guy that was a head coach and wants more power and then gets more power. And then, ooh, that's not very good. specific names or anything. Chris Jones. Anyway, so I'm curious to see how this rolls out for Dinwiddie. He may be capable. He may be capable of doing that, but I'm curious how that plays with his players and how he's able to adapt to that, having both of those roles and being able to have, yes, I want more say in the personnel, but you have more say in the personnel? Are you then having the same impact with the guys on the field to have that production? And that I don't know yet.
It's no secret that I'm not a fan of the combined head coach GM position. I've stated that pretty emphatically, and it's a lot for Dinwiddie to prove, especially coming into a struggling team like that, and a lot of pressure coming in. So he's under a microscope right now, and he needs to deliver. I don't see it being a role in this day and age in professional football that is easy to do both of those jobs.
I really do think, though, that Sean Burke is going to be very influential in all of this, even though he has stepped away with those titles and responsibilities. I don't see Burke giving up a lot of the say. I do believe that's going to have to be a very collaborative approach to all of this. Because if you think about it, when you're dealing with, as Andrew pointed out, when you deal with salaries and re-signing players, that gets pretty sticky and can get pretty hurtful. If Sean Burke has more of a role in putting the player's name to the dotted line, if Dinwiddie says, look, you sign him, and him, Sean Burke has to come up with the numbers, then I think he gets to shield himself a little bit from that.
Yeah, maybe a little, but he also then is the guy making the cuts. Do you know what I mean?
But typically they do anyway.
I know, but I just find I agree with you, Heath. I think it's just a really hard balance to have now. And yes, you can have another guy doing the sign on the dotted line, all those types of things. I don't know how many of those systems have been successful though. That would, unless it's one guy's vision and the other guy works with what they get. And not to say that they don't collaborate, they do. Your role is taking care of the money and all of the contracts and making sure that the player is looked after. My role is to make sure that I get as much out of the player as possible. And it's really hard to do that when you control both.
I would agree. And I know we talked about Chris Jones and what happened in Edmonton and Saskatchewan. Wally Buono seemed to be the one coach and general manager that it seemed to work for, but even near the end of his days, that the team was kind of midland. The thing that I still think, though, is that every coach has a say on who's going to be on that team. Like Corey Mace in Saskatchewan, I'll just use him as an example. He's not going to go to Jeremy O'Day and say, well, who do you think should make the team now that we've had 10 days of practice? He's going to be going to Jeremy O'Day and saying, I don't think this guy belongs here. I think this guy needs more development. I think this guy, can we figure our way to get him on a practice roster?
No, true.
And then Jeremy O'Day's job is to go out and figure that out. And that's where I think maybe Sean Burke could help a little bit, just offload of some of that other administrative stuff.
Possible. I just think that the player knows that the decision of where this goes was, and I don't know how they've broken up those roles. I'm not saying that you're wrong, because that could work. I just don't know. I haven't heard it working in other situations before.
The reason why he's got the general managership is Dinwiddie wants that say. He wants he wants his team. He wants to make up his team. He wants that control.
Yeah. You're kidding. He wants more control. Weird. Yeah.
I'm not as down on Dinwiddie as maybe some people are. I think he's got a lot going for him. The one thing that he has to be better at, in my viewpoint, after a loss, don't project such venom. Try to step up a little bit higher.
After a win, don't be such a jerk. I'm good with either side, or both. I don't know. I'm just not. I'm not that big of a fan. Either way, on either side, right?
Well, he's a far cry from Mark Killam, who's
correct,
very positive. There's an intensity that Mark Killam has, but it bubbles a different way.
Yes, 100%. And yeah, he gets disappointed after a game and all those types of things, but he's not gonna throw his players under the bus. And yet Ed Hervey's a guy that will have a straight up conversation with you. You didn't do this well, period. The end of the conversation, right? So there's some balance there.
There's potential for some turmoil in the East this year. I think a lot of stability in the West right now, if you look at the coaching staff. So even the teams that had new head coaches last year, Buck Pierce and Mark Killam are back. Not a lot of turnover. We mentioned Tommy Condell in Winnipeg as a new OC. There's a lot of stability in quarterbacks and a lot of stability in coaching staffs in the West. You look at the East right now, and we've talked about Dinwiddie and his new role with the Red Blacks. You've got Mike Miller taking over as head coach in Toronto with a number one quarterback who hasn't really played much in 2 years. And how well is he going to bounce back? We're not going to get into the off-field stuff with him, but it looks like he's going to play this year. And whether they come out running or not, Davis Alexander with that terrible hamstring injury that he tweaked a couple of times last year as well, you've got to look at how he's recovered and is he close to 100%? If he's on, I think Montreal really has a strong case to win the East this year. Bo Levi Mitchell's another year older, but I think Hamilton's kind of right there. But Ottawa, Toronto are going to be the ones that could be up, but they could also be way down.
Remember, too, that the Montreal Alouettes have given up a lot on defense, not the least of which Darnell Sankey is now in British Columbia.
Yeah. Boo. Sorry. all three of us were thinking it. Come on. I just said it out loud. Yeah.
You just don't plug and play that easily with a guy that talented. It's a Wynton McManus situation in Toronto. They got to have somebody that can take over. Now, it might be Dark Angelo. It might be somebody else, but they need somebody to take over. And you think of Adam Bighill and how important he was to that Winnipeg defense. Talk about a Swiss Army knife. He could play corner if he had to. That type of person, you just don't replace that easily. And the Bombers' defense has taken a bit of a hit since he's left.
They have for sure. And that's a great point about Montreal. They've kind of gone the other way. They won with a more dominant defense. They've now seen the evolution and the rise of Davis Alexander as quarterback, as I said, if healthy. So now they've sacrificed a little bit on the defensive side. You mentioned Sankey, Marc-Antoine Dequoy retired this year as well. That's another key component of that defense for Montreal. They're going to be the team that's going to need to really, I mean, it's the goal of everybody, but outscore the other team more so than prevent the other team. So there could be some high-flying scores coming out of Montreal.
I would suggest that between BC and Montreal, one of those two teams is going to score the most points this season. If Alexander, they say as he's going into camp, is 100% with that leg, the hamstrings of tears have healed, then watch out. Montreal is going to be dynamite. And I can't wait for them to play BC.
Yeah, that could be a fun game.
Take the over.
Yeah, take the over in a big way.
130.
Yeah.
We're going to have a real treat this year with the Edmonton Elks going back to the traditional home of the football team in Edmonton, Clark Stadium, a stadium that hasn't been used since Commonwealth opened back in, 1978?
Correct. 1978 is when it opened up, and I have only ever watched Edmonton football at Commonwealth Stadium. To me, hearing a lot of the old stories, obviously, I mean, we all know Mike and his wealth of knowledge and of history. And he got to watch games at Clark before Commonwealth opened up. And when they announced that they were going back to Clark for the preseason game, I thought, you want to talk about flashback. You want to talk about a retro game. This is it. This is a place that they're going to sit approximately 8,000 fans in, and we'll be able to sit and you're basically on the field to watch the game. It's going to be very intimate. I think for that amount of fans, it'll be loud because the place is going to be packed. I'm just really excited to have that feel of going back to watch a game. And I did ask Coach Killam a little bit about it on day one of practice, because they're practicing right now at Clark as well. It's the ghosts of the team's past, right? And you're in that history, and I know they've really been working on bringing that history to the team and having them understand where the team came from. And I think that it just adds to that as they're going to play a game there. It's going to be very, very cool.
It's going to be kind of a fun season. So we've got that preseason game at Clark Stadium. They're adding some temporary seating in there as well to try to boost capacity a little bit. We've got the BC Lions on the move because of the World Cup playing at some different venues as well. Like I said, the Clark Stadium's kind of a throwback one. There's going to be some different locations hosting games this year, and it'll be interesting to see how they appear, especially when the games are televised, what that look is and what the feel is in the stadium. I'm kind of excited for it.
2 games in Kelowna for the regular season for the BC Lions. And of course, the Saskatchewan Roughriders home preseason game is against Winnipeg at Griffith Stadium in Saskatoon, a place they haven't played in over 35 years. Clark Stadium was opened in 1938. It was the home of the team until 1978.
Clark just has that old-timey feel. Although I have to admit, I did end up buying tickets on the east side, which is weird for me, but I did because those are the sides that have backs, and I need to have a back on my chair. I think it's going to be like full retro, where, I know for the tailgate, we're going to be doing hot dogs, like retro stuff, popcorn. And they're setting up food trucks that are going to be out and around the north end of the stadium there. And I'm curious to know if they're going to have some of that kind of retro feel. And I did say this to my group today. It's unfortunate. I love that they're playing in Clark, but I wish they would have had a little more warning, to the point where they could have done the green and the actual gold helmets, to kind of like that they did in the 60s, and it would have just been a cool retro night. But again, it's a preseason game. We don't know if it's going to be televised. We don't know how that's all going to land, even though it's going to be really cool. And actually, as it turns out, the Elks are playing both of their preseason games in smaller venues like that, because their first one is in BC when they're playing in Langford, and then their home game is at Clark. So I'm very curious as to how they've done a good job of selling it as a retro night, but I'm curious what they do on site to make it feel, because again, it is a preseason game. It's an evaluation game, but you still want to be able to get the feel of what it was like to watch a football game, in the early 70s.
Any thought of bringing back the Knothole Gang?
Yeah, I know that they did kind of mention it, but I haven't heard for sure if that's like happening. I know that the tickets weren't cheap. Even if you're a season ticket holder, they refunded your preseason seat, and then when they released the tickets, you had to be there on that day to buy your tickets for the preseason games. Like I said, I'm really hoping that means it's going to be full and loud, which will be weird for a preseason game, but it'll be fun.
The reason I bring up the Knothole Gang is sort of a area of the old Clark Stadium where the kids were, and it was 25 cents a seat.
Yeah, exactly. But all that was in the days though where all the kids would sit over there and the adults would go to their regular seat. I can't even imagine that happening now. It'd be absolute mayhem. Either that, or there'd be all of these kids not looking at the game and just staring down at their phones.
Yeah.
I don't know if a parent would be okay with that. Just leave them with all the other kids with no. Yeah, in the 70s, there was no there was not somebody monitoring the area. It was just that's where the kids went and they watched. And be interesting. So I don't think they'll bring it back to that extent, but they might do, something that's a little bit in between, where they have like a family type section, or in the tailgate area there'll be like a kids play area that may go on throughout the game, and then the parents can kind of be in and around. Yep.
When you think back to Clark in his final days, that was the burgeoning Edmonton team that was starting to put it together and start going to Grey Cups year after year.
Yeah. It was August of 78, I think, when they moved in there.
The last game at Clark Stadium was 14-8 victory over the Bombers on August 23rd, 78.
We've had an opportunity to hear from lots of fans, players, former players, executives about the 2027 change to the playoff structure in the CFL. Andrew, we haven't had a chance to talk to you yet since that has been announced. Where do you stand on getting 8 teams now involved in some sort of postseason play?
Well, let me start by saying I'm really, really upset that they did that on the same day as draft day. Don't take away the highlight of some of these kids getting drafted into the league. I mean, just announce it on Wednesday. And I feel like they did that because they thought that the positivity from the draft would kind of buffer the reaction of the fans from this news. And so I found that just the timing was awful, in my opinion.
To be fair, Heath brought up, this is just speculation, of course, but what if there was a leak burgeoning and they had to get in front of it?
I said the same thing, that's the only thing that makes sense. Yet on the other hand, it's that's just so ill-timed. Like, it really is ill-timed. So whether you like it or not, it was not great timing to announce, in my opinion. Now, the first thing that I said to Mike when he messaged me that, because I was on holidays and not paying attention to anything, I said, so basically the regular season means nothing now, is what you're saying.
It's a stratification process.
Sure, it's your seeding, but how many times in the past, I want to say even 4 years, has the seeding kind of been determined? There's times where you wonder if they're going to make the playoffs or not, but now it's like, oh no, they'll make the playoffs. I just don't know who they're going to play. That was my first reaction, is just like, well, the regular season really means nothing. Like, yes, there's seeding, and yes, I understand the first and second team kind of get a second shot at it, right? I don't know that I like that. But once I had time to think about it, I think that these moves, much like a lot of the moves with the different rule changes, are based on the CFL expanding their number of teams. And I still want to see that. I don't want it to water down the greatness of our league. I don't want that to be a problem. But it's like these moves are being made, what's the word? Preparation of expansion. And you're doing it before there's even really a good rumor of expansion. Do you know what I mean? So I'm hoping that is what it is, because if they're going to keep it to 9 teams, but 8 teams make the playoffs. Well, that, to me, that's not really competitive in my mind. I get the seeding, but I just find that it's not as competitive as when you have a team that's hanging on for dear life and might just make it if they win this game in week 17. Now it's like, no, they'll be in the playoffs. We just don't know where they're going to exactly play first. So it just takes away some of what I like about having some teams miss.
Well, I saw an interesting tweet about the 9th place team in 2027, and it basically says on the shirt, I played the entire season and all I got was this lousy shirt.
Yeah. Which is, I mean, that could be 3 teams right now. Misery loves company. I'm not sure how I'm supposed to say that, but I do think that it's just odd to me that you would have greater than 80% of your league make the playoffs.
Now, if you look at the wording of it, those first games are play-in games. They're not playoff games. So we'll talk semantics here. That's why I carefully worded it in my intro there that they are postseason games,
Yes,
not
correct.
necessarily playoff games. So if you're a Stu Johnson stan, you can basically declare that no, there's essentially four teams clinch playoff berths. The other four teams are involved in a play-in game for the final two playoff spots. I don't know if I buy into that necessarily myself either. I'm just playing devil's advocate here a little bit.
How do you mean four teams are guaranteed? Because first place is playing on the opening weekend.
Yeah. So ones and twos are in the playoffs, and then the seeds 5 through 8 are in the.
But they don't knock anybody out. That would be the one game that I would say is not a playoff game because nobody is being eliminated. Every other instance is.
But in week 2, they are of the postseason. All those ones and twos are going to be playing in a playoff game.
No, the winner of that game doesn't play in week 2.
Right, they don't play again until week 3, but it will be a playoff game at that point. So what I'm saying is the first and second seeds are guaranteed playoff games. five through.
That's the thing. I know they just announced it, but how are we going to figure this out in the season? Who plays? I don't know. Whatever. Just show up. There we go. Great. Yeah.
Opening weekend with the West Showdown, East Showdown, and of course these play-in games. To distill this, think of the opening round, the first weekend, as the extension of the season, just for sake of argument. Okay. The playoffs start the following week. That's when every game somebody gets eliminated. So it's 3 weeks of pure elimination football, which are playoff games because somebody's getting eliminated. You're playing the other team to find out who stays and who goes. I agree. Semantics is just silly. It's the same thing in the NBA. They have these play-in series. Well, what are you doing? You're eliminating teams. They're playoffs.
It made sense during the pandemic seasons. I know the NHL did some play-in things as well. The seasons got kind of skewed, and not that I was necessarily a big fan of that either, but I kind of understood it from that point. What the NBA is doing right now is kind of silly as well with play-ins. You've got a full season to determine whether you're good enough to make the playoffs or not. And if you're almost there, you kind of get this bonus opportunity. I guess for the CFL, it means that the Elks will probably sneak in a few years here coming up as well.
Wait a second. They're going to make it without that. That's what's going to, there's
a poke.
right in it. Yeah, I was going to say, geez, tell ya, talk about kicking a guy when he's down. Thanks, Keith.
I'm saying they're going to make the playoffs.
Oh, great. Yeah. As is everyone else. Yeah.
They're going to make the postseason. It's almost guaranteed.
Yeah.
Somebody's going to be on the outside looking in going, how did we not get there?
Who wants to be the first team to do that?
I just want to say one thing. This whole playoff revamp, everything comes down to Stuart Johnson's hatred of the fact that first place teams one win and you get to go to the Grey Cup. And this is all about trying to figure out how to make them play a second game. And this is what they came up with. 19 seasons since the CFL first introduced 18 game schedules. There have been 19 seasons where 9 teams or more have participated. And of those seasons, if this playoff format had been in place, a 4-14 team would have made it 5 times. A 5-13 team would have made it 9 times. So 14 times out of those 19 seasons, a team with almost a 1/4 win rate would make the playoffs.
And 2023 would have been kind of the ugliest of that because you'd have had 2 6-12 teams in Calgary and Saskatchewan and then a 4-14 team in the Ottawa Red Blacks into it as well. So that's a pretty ugly playoff picture there. It has been interesting to see player reactions as well. Justin Dunk from 3 Down Nation had a great interview with Brett Lothar now of the Ottawa Red Blacks and of the CFLPA executive talking about the benefits to the players of getting these added to postseason games. It really put things into perspective. I mean, you look at different teams. The Winnipeg Blue Bombers, for example, Brady Oliveira is very vocal in not liking the 8 teams in. Jake Seresna came out earlier this week saying he loves it, and they're both wearing blue and gold. You've got differing opinions there, but at the end of the day, more revenue equals more pay for those players.
Again, I can see the benefit of it. I just think it would be better if they're it's like they're changing the rules preemptively for expansion. Okay, fine enough, but if we're gonna have this, I would just feel better about it if it was like, okay, well then can we get to at least 10 teams, or can we get to preferably to 12? So you have a quarter of your teams aren't making the play-in playoffs, whatever we want to call it. The postseason. There you go, like you said, Heath.
The other thing that we have to get used to is after that opening weekend, then it's worst versus first from there on out. So you could have the second place team in the East winding up in the West final, we'll call it for that, working their way through the other way, because maybe being second in the East wasn't so great. So they're still the worst record, boom, 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 left, and they wind up playing the top team in the West that's still available. You could have an all Eastern Grey Cup as a result. You could have an all Western Grey Cup as a result. I don't know how much it's going to move the needle in Montreal if the Stampeders and the Elks are in the Grey Cup. Certainly Alberta would just be going nuts. Western Canada probably. How does that play out east? You run that risk. And what if, and remember back to when Ottawa played Edmonton and they had a 5-win season and they played in that Grey Cup final. What if one of those 8th place teams makes it with that record?
Well, we've had that opportunity with the crossover for years of an all East or an all West Grey Cup. It just never came to fruition because no team managed to go that route. So it is still a difficult task. As I said before, if a 5-13 Bomber team goes on a tear in the playoffs and wins the Grey Cup, I'll feel okay about it, but I'm still not likely gonna love it. If a 14-4 Bomber team loses to a 4-14 Calgary Stampeders team in a Grey Cup, I'm going to like it even less.
Yeah. I think that, and you can say, well, they got hot at the right time, all those types of things. And that happens in hockey. That happens in basketball. It happens in the NFL. You can see teams that just catch fire at the right time and do just enough to squeak in. The difference being is that there's less than half of the teams that are making the postseason. That's not, what is it? 93% or something? Somebody said.
The CFL?
Yeah.
88.8.
88.8% of your league is making that's pretty safe to say you're going to get a postseason game of some kind most years.
As a kid, I couldn't figure out why the NHL had 16 of 21 teams at that time when they added the WHA franchises. Why they had 16 of 21. You play an 82-game schedule, and you eliminate 5 teams. You knock off 4 in the first round. You've almost done as much in 2 weeks as you've done in the previous 20.
Right. Yeah, exactly. And that's what I'm saying, right? Are they setting up for expansion of some kind? I hope so.
Well, it's got to be a precursor. But the other thing I'd love to finally have some relief from is no more major announcements for a while. Like, it just doesn't it feel like back in September 22nd, we got, the field is changing. We're doing all this in 2027. Okay, we're finally getting our heads wrapped around this. No more 55. The goalposts will be at the back. We get the 35-second clock. I love. I should mention, watching it at Rough Rider Camp, they started to practice with it.
It's cool.
They were blowing through it because guys were showboating and not getting back to the huddle, and the coaches weren't too uptight about it. Day one, okay, we'll live with it, but you can't be that way very long. Really struck me that it takes about 10 or more seconds for those offensive guys to make it back to the huddle. You're down to your 20-second clock in a heartbeat if you don't hustle.
Yeah, very true. And the Elks today did the obviously end of quarter. They were using the 20-second clock, or end of half, I guess. They were using the 20-second clock and playing, hurry up offense. And I'm like, oh man, okay. Yeah. And then they went back to the 35 and you're like, yeah, well, this is a good balance. I don't mind this.
Yeah, I think the 35 is going to be an absolute positive boon. Like, this is just going to help the game because we're going to get more plays. We're going to get less substitutions. So in other words, the guys out there are going to have to stay out there and make plays. And I love that. It's going to be more playing time for starters anyway. Okay, so September 22nd, all this happens. Boom, we get hit again on draft day that now a whole bunch more stuff. Okay, I'm just starting to breathe from the last one. Now I have to work through this. Like the old ticker may not take another one if they say, okay, that's it. That's fair catches and 4 downs and 10 inches off the ball. And
Yeah, they could be a lot of different changes. And I think the next announcement, though, has to be a positive one. And that being either we're adding a team or
new television contract.
Yeah, exactly. Like something that then would balance for that. A lot of people will say, well, these announcements were positive too. I'm like, well, not for everybody. And it causes some confusion, as we just proved. We had no idea I don't know who's doing what. But I do think that it would be, they need to now have the announcement of, here's the thing to look forward to that everyone would, or not everyone, because it's never going to be everyone, but a majority of people will be like, this makes the other stuff make some sense. Do you know what I mean? Like, I think they need something along those lines.
Well, they've announced a new season-long fantasy league with the CFL where you can be a team manager, as it were, a general manager, and pick a certain number of players and carry them through the season. And I think that's fantastic because so many of the pools that we play in outside of the CFL, that's exactly what's going on.
That's exactly.
And I'll give them credit, though, if for one thing, and if one thing the CFL did well, how much debate has been going on over these playoffs and who's been paying attention to the UFL?
Totally. Yeah, that's fair.
I was going to add that there's been all this discussion. We haven't seen any of it come to fruition yet. We haven't even seen the changes that are coming for 2026. You've both alluded to seeing snippets of it in camp so far, but there's so many people that have spouted off both positively and negatively about all these things that we haven't seen any of it in gameplay on the field.
Yeah, very true.
That's right. It's all speculation. It's all hyperbole until we actually see how it plays out. And it may be a fantastic thing. Maybe this new playoff format, everybody gets excited. And I love the fact that the season's starting earlier. This is the one great thing, and I'll give Johnston a little bit of kudos for this. He knows how to give you something that you're going to love with something that you're not sure of. He throws out the 35-second clock. Gotta love that. Oh, but we're moving the goalposts and shrinking the field. Oh, we're getting a new playoff format. Oh, and by the way, we're moving the season earlier.
Even the 35-second clock, there was people saying that this was the end of Canadian football as we know it because it was going to kill the last 3 minutes, even though there had been no formal announcements made about the last 3 minutes. And so we've seen now it's gone through the rules committee. We know they're keeping the last 3 minutes of each half sacred to what it was, and that clock management, the 20-second clock, the inability to take a knee with 2 minutes left in the game. That was what people were spouting of the end of football as we know it, and it didn't come to fruition because they just jumped at something's changing and I don't like it without waiting to listen to what that change was.
Well, there are even podcasts out there saying this is the last year of the CFL, and there's all kinds of doom and gloom going on. I remember people, when they canceled the 2020 season, said, well, that's it. There's never going to be a CFL because they can't afford to go on. There's a lot of people jumping off the plank.
But not on this podcast and not on the Turf District podcast. Andrew, tell us about your podcast and where people can follow you.
Wow, that was an incredible man. Kudos. That was amazing. Well done. Well, great transition. Yes, on our podcast, I will say that we did gripe about the rules a little bit, but then we found some balance. Anyway, if you would like to join us, we are on Tuesday nights. We are live on YouTube at 7:30 Alberta time or Mountain time. Join us live, throw in your comments and questions as we go through. And we are now back to our regular weekly schedule because we do a little bit patchy in the off season, but we are back to talk football each and every week, do some pick'ems, and likely get in on some of this fantasy fun.
Third Down Gamble uses the expert resources of the Canadian Football League and 3 Down Nation. For up-to-date, insightful statistics and analysis, please visit cfl.ca and 3downnation.com. The CFL on CBC theme music is used with written permission from the Canadian Broadcasting Corporation.
Thank you for listening to our show. Third Down Gamble is hosted on Podbean. Follow us on Twitter, where our handle is @ThirdDownGamble. Join us again next time. The Third Down Gamble Podcast. Audio worth watching.